Here is the corrections of the assignment regarding the introductions of new sources of income and new taxes in the model. I remind you what the assignment was about. Based on the model that was available on the platform, two shocks had to be compared. On the one hand, an increase by 100 in remittances from workers who had emigrated abroad to local households, and on the other hand, an increase by 100 in transfers from the state to households. I ask you to pay particular attention to the impact on productions by explaining the channel of transmission. So first, let us start by recalling the assumptions of the model. With regards to what is usually referred to as public closure, the public balance is constant, and in the event of a change in public revenue, public expenditure is adjusted. With regard to external closure, the exchange rate remains constant, and the current account adjusts in the event of a change in household savings and/or in investment. Here are the results in terms of variations in production volume. In the event of an increase by 100 in remittances from workers who have emigrated abroad to local households, production increases by 0.1% in agriculture, falls by 0.4% in industry, and increases by 0.3% in services. If there is an increase by 100 in transfers from the state to households, production increases by 0.3% in agriculture, 0.1% in industry, and drops by 0.2% in services. So the two shocks are distinguished by the negative impact on industry for the shock on remittances and the negative impact on services for the shock on transfers from the state to households. I will describe here the main transmission channels. It's a slightly distorted view of reality. Indeed, in a computable general equilibrium model, all the variables adjust to each other simultaneously. I will present here the first-order transmission channels, that is to say the most important mechanisms at work. First, consider an increase by 100 in remittances from workers who have emigrated abroad to local households. Household income ultimately increases, that is to say after all the adjustments, by 101. This makes it possible to finance an increase in consumption for households in each sector, plus 17 in agriculture, plus 12 in industry, and plus 34 in services. So these variations in consumption demand depend on the initial structure of this consumption. To be convinced of this, remember that the utility of households is a Cobb-Douglas, and look at the value of the gamma parameters, which are the budgetary shares of each good in the total consumption of households. At the same time, public revenues increase slightly because direct and indirect taxes increase slightly due to the increase in income and consumption. We have other mechanisms that come into play, but in the end, public revenues increase slightly, and as a result, public spending also increases, plus 9. And so public spending increased by plus 1 in agriculture, plus 2 in industry, plus 5 in services. But at the same time, business investment is affected. On the one hand, the current account increases by 102 due to the increase of 100 in remittances from workers who have emigrated abroad to local households. On the other hand, household savings increase by 22 due to the increase in national income, which has a positive effect on business investments, but not enough to offset the first effect, which is negative for business investment. And in business investment fell by a total of 77. And so consumption of capital goods fell by 16 in the case of purchases of agricultural goods, 56 in the case of purchases of industrial goods, and 8 in the case of purchases of services. In total, the demand for goods, and therefore the production of goods, increases in agriculture and services, but decreases in industry because the last channel is important. The increase in the current account implies an eviction of private investment, and as this private investment is mainly composed of industrial goods, in total the productions of industrial goods decreases significantly, minus 41. Let us now consider the increase by 100 in transfers from the state to households. Household income ultimately increases, that is to say, after all the adjustments that takes place, by 99. This makes it possible to finance an increase in consumption for households in each sector, plus 19 in agriculture, plus 13 in industry, and plus 40 in services. This is an increase similar to the one caused by the first shock. Again, these variations in consumption demand depend on the initial structure of this consumption. There is practically no effect here on the current account or a second-order effect. On the other hand, households' savings increase due to the increase in disposable income. This is the most important channel for business investment, which increases slightly by 25, and therefore the demand for goods in each sector for capital formation purposes increase. On the other hand, there is a significant depressive effect on public spending. Indeed, the increase by 100 in transfer from the state to households tend to increase the public deficit, even if public revenues increase slightly. To keep the public balance constant, public expenditure must be reduced by 98, minus 11 in agriculture, minus 24 in industry, and minus 65 in services. The depressive effect is very strong in services because the share of services in public spending is very high. Look at the value of the alpha_G parameter. In total, production increases slightly in agriculture and industry, but it falls in services, mainly due to the decline in public consumptions of services, which is taking place to keep the public balance constant. So the two shocks are similar in terms of the expansionary effect on disposable income, private consumption, and household savings, but they differ in terms of the effect on the current account and on public spending.